Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone seeking to survive or thrive as a Pilates instructor. There's so much to talk about today, and I don't think I can try to repeat it twice. So I'm going to try to give the short version here on YouTube, and feel free to expand it a little more on Facebook to come. So number one, out of six, 1 out of 6. Okay, so I'm just repeating what I already put in a post on Friday, I think, yeah? No, it was last night, because it wasn't a video post, it was a link to an article by Judy Thrinkner. Judy Thrinkner. Powerful article about, titled, it's a guest commentary, and it's titled Degrading Language Limits Us. And so, number one is a statement from MMP to you that from the Michael Miller Pilates point of view, Pilates is a language. It has a grammar. Right? Get over it. Right? And to that end, I have highlighted parts I want to. Her focus is on literal grammar in English, the English language. And my profession is that you can understand that obviously Pilates is a language because it does have grammar. And so the first thing I would transpose from her article to the point of view about Pilates is, does it matter how we use words if our intention is clear? So does it matter how we use words if our intention is clear? That's a good question, because I would see it as, does it matter how we use exercises if our intention is clear? And to me, that's an enigma about what is it clear about? And if the exercises don't match the clarity of the words of the exercises, let me do another one. Most instructors I know do not know the grammar behind the language that they speak. Now, she talked about most adults. I said most teachers, most Pilates instructors, most of the culture, from my point of view, do not know the grammar behind the language that they're speaking. To the point, in a big way, they don't even recognize the essence of the language, that they are speaking a language. Judy Thrinkner goes on to say, if these small details don't matter, what does? And she's pointing out to like words and the use of words, and does it matter if the words themselves are spelled correctly or not? The details of the English language that are defined by the grammar of the language. Remember, this is the MMP point of view, that Pilates obviously is a language, and as such has grammar. And if the structure of the grammar doesn't matter, or if the grammar doesn't matter, then, what does? If how you speak the language doesn't matter, then why use it at all? Well, that's okay. So there's where I would come back to the point of focus for the MMP point of view that I heard from everyone that I ever met, over a dozen people that knew and worked with Joe. They would always get around to, if not right up front, say Joseph Pilates was a survivor. And there was like usually a period at the end of that and a pregnant pause to send the message, and it was being observed by the person that spoke those words, what that meant to you. You know, how much did you get of describing Joseph Pilates as a survivor? Now, you may never go read the article, and it's right here. Let me read this long paragraph for you, because it's about language, and it's about Pilates, and it's about totalitarian government could take complete control of its people. This is George Orwell. George Orwell illustrated how a totalitarian government could take complete control of its people, say like the Pilates culture, once it had complete control of the language, once it could define what the language is. Simplified language leads to simplified thought, which is a nice set of words. Simplified language leads to simplified thought. Politicians employ this in their political campaigns, and only careful readers can distinguish language used to inform and language used to incite. At the basis of this distinction, I'm quoting still, is respect for the power of language. The better, okay, so what's number two? Number two, the better you speak the language, the more likely you are to survive. I mean, just those words would seem to be, well, what language are you talking about? And if it's a language that has something to do with how well you survive within that environment, then yes, how well you use the language influences how well you survive in that arena that the language matters. For me, I'm talking about being a Pilates instructor. Right? People that want to incite you with language are different than people that want to inform you with language. And the agendas are really different. And as a Pilates instructor, I'm being paid to protect and be in service of my student. That's how I look at it. You know, they're my client, but the Pilates itself is something that you teach to a student. And that's by virtue of Joe's words, and there's a quote on that, and that distinguishment between student and patient or whatever. No, we're teaching something. Carefully, I'm quoting again from Judy Trinkner. Carefully constructed sentences with clear purpose and tone constitute meaningful dialogue. Hello? Yes? And I would say the same about Pilates. Carefully constructed exercises with clear purpose and tone, I'm not sure what tone might be, constitute meaningful dialogue. So there they're talking about purpose to the effort to communicate. I think the author is making the point that and that's taking me to number 3, I think. Okay, all right. So, number 3, recognize what it takes to survive. And recognize what it takes to survive. And at what level do you aspire to survive to or in, right? Meaning everybody speaks the language and nobody even really recognizes or acknowledges its essence, its own essence as a language. To the point where whatever you make up is the language. That's how the tsunami of Pilates passion is expressing itself in multiplicity. So what it takes to survive is to be able to speak the language. But the higher you go in your aspirations within any culture, the better you speak the language. I mean, why do you think religious orders would be the first to send out priests and make dictionaries and grammar of languages, right? So this whole expression of colloquial, conventional Pilates, in my point of view, is, how does she say it, is a mere surface of meaning. That's her words. A mere surface of meaning. And indeed, a tsunami is the surface that you see, but it's all the power and the wave within it that, as an instructor, I feel I'm expected to be able to plumb the depths of. It's getting beyond the surface. Anybody and everybody already now teaches Pilates. And to survive and to escape being boring, not knowing how to take it to depth, a lot of other things come into it. Or maybe more things just come into it normally and naturally, but at the heart of Pilates is Pilates. So, in paraphrasing her talk about, her students tell her they write what sounds right. It's like intuitively teaching Pilates by what feels right, okay? And it's like, that's not bad. That's one way to do it. But teaching like that, and here's her quote about writing like that, is like pitching blindfolded. The ball will travel a distance, but you can't be sure where it will land. In her example, inane does not mean insane. And to me, teaching Pilates from the seat of your pants is like pitching blindfolded. Whereas without the blindfold on, you have a much higher likelihood of being closer to your target and thereby being more effective, right? One last thing. My students argue that grammar rules seem arcane and irrelevant. But if how a person says something doesn't matter, so if how a person says something doesn't matter, then what a person says also no longer matter. And that's, for me, a fascinating reflection, trying to see through the eyes of Pilates on the Pilates culture. if teachers argue that grammar rules don't matter, or they're not even there. I mean, like most of the Pilates culture wouldn't even deign to give up the sovereignty of self-determination to what Pilates is. Some might stoop to argue that grammar rules seem arcane and irrelevant. But if how a person says something doesn't matter, then won't what a person says also no longer matter? And see, here we're talking about surviving as a Pilates instructor in the tsunami of Pilates passion and all the expression that is coming out of that. If all you're doing, see, here, are you a bobber? Really? Are you afloat adrift in the world of subjective interpretation of what Pilates is? And of course, everyone would say, well, I'm connected through the school that I learned from and the studio that I work in and all my clients, and all of that is part of the fabric. But if it's a fabric of something, and it truly is a language, or if you at least, to survive, you better know how to look at Pilates as a language, even if you don't want to or care to consider it as such. There, that's a good statement. Okay? Even if you don't care and it doesn't matter, you at least ought to know about it. So number three, recognize what it takes to survive. So what I would tell you is that within the culture, it's a fricassee of self-interest. A fricassee is a stew made from different game. And each game, in this case, each piece in that fricassee has its own self-interest, stewing along with all the other self-interest in this subject of Pilates, this stew of Pilates. See, I don't know. I have no idea what somebody thinks it takes. See, to me, the whole presumption is you go to school, you learn some Pilates, and whatever you learned is enough then for you to make of it whatever you want. And it's whatever you make of it that matters more than whatever you could possibly have learned about it. Because if you're new, this is the first time you've been introduced to the notion, to the point of view, that there's an idea within Joe's original work. And to me, what it's going to take to survive is recognizing that MMP is out there because of you and me. And MMP as a point of view is going to look like high ground to a lot of desperate people that can't make sense of anything, or are wanting to make more sense out of what they already know. Right? And MMP is different in that it's not about a heritage of lineage through a tradition that knew Joe and what they passed on, but simply, very simply, a point of view based on the evidence in Joe's book. And so number 4 is lean into it. Now, I don't mean lose your balance, but I do mean recognize where an advantage is and lean into it if you so choose to. Number 5, value and respect the basis of Pilates prestige is the title. Value and respect, the basis of Pilates prestige. And see, where does she say? See, I would make the argument, or from the point of view about survival. MMP is a perspective of Pilates as its founder, as a survivor, and its method as survival training. So the 10,000 other ways you can look at this, the MMP point of view starts with the human being as a survivor and making a method of conditioning for humanity. And the pen is mightier than the sword. Perhaps, I'm quoting, perhaps we should begin to, see anything that says perhaps we should, is such a subtle manipulation of guile that I would steer clear of whatever comes after that. Because she says, begin to value and respect the rules that have won the pen such prestige. See, it's a beautiful statement. The pen is mightier than the sword. But to say perhaps we should begin to value is one way of saying it. And I would put it forth, if you want to survive, you better value it, is the point. If you want to survive, you better value the advantage of the pen over the sword, the value of understanding language in its impact on the use of the sword. So that was number 5, right? Number 6. Keep your attitude in a perfume bottle. Keep your attitude. Your attitude is something you choose, wholly, completely, 100% unescapable, is the attitude you choose unavoidably, regardless of your circumstance. It's one of the largest things that reflects your character next to actually what you do. Perhaps the choice of attitude is what precedes action taken. My point is that your attitude is this precious thing that is completely under your own control. And so in that regard, it's potent. And that's why it's in a perfume bottle, because you keep something that's potent in a perfume bottle. And then my note says, keep it safe, of course, and available. And so that takes me up to my summary. Gosh, did I talk enough about all this stuff? I don't know. That was a lot of 3 days worth of stuff in that article in yesterday's paper. Most of my contemporary world of Pilates culture hasn't even been exposed to a point of view like this. So that means that what this author is writing about English, that's an acknowledged language, and how much the detail of the grammar, how much the detail of the language and its ability to use it is influential in your survival when it comes to your ability to speak a language. To me, the transposition, it just applies the same to the Pilates world as a Pilates instructor through the eyes of MMP. you look at Joe's definition, promise, and sequence. And primarily it's the sequence that in the grammar exists in, right? Progressive pattern. Know what you know. And that's part of the perfume in your perfume bottle. That's part of the attitude that informs you, along with everything else. It's not my idea, it's the ideal within Joe's work. And that's why, didn't I get to that? I never wrote that in. A title I didn't number, because I didn't want to, is that JP will always be the sheriff. JP, JHP if you want. JHP will always be the sheriff. There's no new sheriff in town, ever, gonna be, when it comes to Pilates. Within an MMP point of view. Because Joe's work all by itself makes a point, an experiential point that drives the experience from ideal aspiration. And because of that, because the artist's work is distinctive in and of its own right, all I've ever been interested in doing is trying to illuminate that with the resources that I have available to me. Drew Brees talking to his team surrounding him before the game in a leading up pep moment, says, "This is our day. This is our moment." Right? What strong words. As a leader about to go into battle kind of thing. Or as anyone about to make a serious enterprise. This is not battle, it's a game. Right? But it's a serious, focused enterprise. It's an effort. And the great thing about Pilates, from my point of view, is it's in the pursuit of the moment. And it's how well you coordinate your efforts in the moment that matters. Because life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking Geist